Okay. Thank you so much for this interview, Alexander, for ADN 40 News. For me, it's quite important what you've done because we're living in very different times in terms of influence. So now, how do you see influence on this stage of the world? How would you define influence
in terms of technology?
Yes.
Well, look, there are a lot of changes that are impacting the world that we live in today, and particularly in communication and marketing. Probably the largest is the impact of big data and predictive analytics. But this, in conjunction with the advances in addressable advertising technology, making it possible for the first time to really start to speak to people in a personalized way. I think that's probably the single biggest influencing factor that's changing the communication and advertising landscape.
At the very beginning of social media, everything was organic, or at least natural. The influence was a consequence of good content, or like being likable with the people and with the audience. But now that we have the paid platforms, do you think a good result of influence is depending on how much money do you put on that platform?
I think it's a balance. I think you see some amazing campaigns that go viral with very little expenditure. You see other campaigns that have had vast amounts of money and resources put behind them that really don't launch in the way that they're meant to. So clearly, having a good product, having a good service, having a good marketing campaign is important. But obviously, if you haven't got the finances, that might be an impediment to success.
So you mentioned the word viral. So for you, at least, what you have done, what was your viral factor? How do you work on that viral factor on the campaign that you've been working on?
You're talking about political campaigns.
Yes.
In the United States.
Yes.
Well, look, we were fortunate in so much as we worked primarily with two candidates in the United States. We worked with Senator Cruz, who had incredibly low name recognition when we started working with him. And that was in contrast to our work for Donald Trump, who through his celebrity television appearances and his brand, which is obviously a US national brand and even a global brand, was already a household name. And therefore, what we saw between these two candidates is that Trump's traction in the media was profound, and that obviously gained him exponential exposure as the campaign continued.
Okay, and how was the building of that campaign in terms of media and social media and all the factors that now are playing on our days?
What happened with Trump was certainly a paradigm shift from even what was happening in Obama's campaign. Obama's campaign was credited as being the first truly digital campaign, but if we could say that about Obama, we could say that Trump's campaign was the truly first data-driven campaign. That is, big data and analytics were used to make every decision. So not just who to target, which constituents to message with which communications, but actually where to hold each rallies, what to talk about, what states to invest resources into, who to target for donations or to enlist for voters and supporters. So it was the first time these technologies had been put into theatre, into the political theatre, and tested out, and clearly they had a huge impact.
How do you empower your clients to take better decisions using big data? Because data is always changing, and it depends on what perspective are you reviewing them.
Well, look, data itself is not that helpful, and I think most data analytics companies would tell you this. Data is like the ingredients. You can buy a lot of ingredients, but you actually need a good chef, hopefully a great chef, to blend those ingredients to make delicious food. And so the secret of data is to use data science to undertake the necessary analytics to derive insight from that data. It's the insight that's valuable. It's being able to turn something that's quite meaningless and turning it into something that's very powerful.
What happened when you mix data with fear and probably with hate on social media? Because it's probably one of the most feeling that has more engagement on social media?
I couldn't begin to answer that question. I've no experience of mixing data with fear or hate.
I mean, when you provoke on social media, have you ever thought about that or making any decisions on how the people react on social media?
Well, yes, but look, we're not in the business of fomenting hate, with or without data. We're in the business of trying to get candidates, our clients, our candidates elected in free and fair democracies, and normally that means extolling their qualities, trying to align their ideologies and their policy perspectives with their constituents, with the voters.
But one of the things that we can measure on social media are the feeling. How do you take decisions on the feelings, probably with the emoticons on Facebook, or how do you make any decisions on these tendencies of feelings or reactions on what the content of your clients?
Well, look, we do try and understand the psychology of our target audience groups. We do quite a lot of work to understand what drivers might be important to influence different groups, to solicit different types of reactions. But beyond that, maybe some social media monitoring and sentiment analysis, we don't have great insight into feelings.
And for you, the message everyone is so obsessed with millennials, everyone wants to have them or to talk to them. Do you have any structure or like a profile of how you are targeting those people that are making the elections now, are taking better decisions, and probably the brands or the candidates don't know how to approach them because most of them think that they are don't interested in that subject?
Well, actually, look, we believe that whilst targeting groups based on demographics is clearly can be helpful, demographics are not the driver of behaviour. So the fact that a target audience has a similar age group or age bracket doesn't dictate that they're all going to react to the same type of messaging, all have the same concerns or care about the same ideology or policies. What we try and do is we try and look at our target audiences both based on demographics, on geographics, on economics, but also on psychographics, on personality. Try and understand how people actually see the world. What are their fundamental motivators? And to then start to speak to them about the things that they really care about, using the language and the imagery and the communications that are most relevant to those specific audience groups.
How do you see the role of this data probably mentor in these campaigns? Because that role has been growing, probably before it was like a trainee, but now it's someone who's empowered by all this data and knowledge. How do you feel this role has been grown or becoming more professional?
Well, look, data is another tool in the box. It's not that data is replacing conventional creative-led communication. I think it's augmenting it. The creative process is here to stay. It's simply the creative-led communication. I think it's augmenting it. The creative process is here to stay. It's simply that way before that starts, we're able to use data to identify the right target audiences, to be able to segment them, and to understand what messages they need to receive. We can then look at more conventional communication channels in order to engage with those different groups. So, I think data is certainly going to have an impact. It's going to be an evolution in terms of how that changes marketing and advertising, not just in politics, but across big brands as well. But I don't think that what we're seeing is the death of one style of media and communication and the birth of something else.
Because everyone says that it's something is replacing one thing, but it is not.
Well, it's a progression, it's an evolution, but it is a profound one, and particularly when you look at the history of advertising and marketing, over the last 50, 60 years, it fundamentally hasn't changed that much. It's largely top-down, that is creative-led, And now what we're seeing is a shift towards bottom-up, data-driven communication, and that is a change.
The message has to be still simple, right? I mean, this advertising people says, keep it simple, stupid, you know? Do you think that it still remains on advertising, to keep it simple?
Well, look, I think it has to be impactful, and there are many drivers for that. You need, in the first instance, to appeal to primary drivers. You need to cut through the noise of all the competing advertising that's out there. Then it needs to be engaging, of course, and thereafter you need to be able to drive conversion. So there are lots of different psychological nuances that can be used to increase compliance from advertising, but maybe keeping it simple could be one of those.
Okay, and do you think that there was a factor on the Trump campaign that changed everything in one precise moment, or it was like a mixture of a lot of factors?
Well, probably the moment he announced his candidacy. I think that changed things for a lot of people. Look, I don't think that any campaign is won in a moment. I think campaigns can be lost in a moment. And we saw a number of candidates make mistakes, and Trump, had some moments in his campaign where he looked vulnerable, but he managed to move on through those and to navigate them successfully. So, I think it was a comprehensive campaign run over very many months, both in the primaries and in the general election, and he proved his dominance in both races.
What was the most hard moment of the campaign? The beginning of the campaign?
Running a big data campaign is all about preparation. The one thing you can't buy in a campaign is time. And the more time you have to prepare, the better. We had to pivot from the Cruz campaign to the Trump campaign only 5.5, 6 months before polling, and we had to scale up the entire research, data, analytics, digital, TV operation in a very, very short amount of time. That was definitely a huge challenge, and something that I'm sure my team won't thank me for.
Can you define your team? How many people and which are the areas of expertise of your team?
Yeah, so about a third of the company are data scientists and data engineers and psychologists. So we have a very large quantity of PhDs. We recruit direct from university and from other academic institutions. About a third of the company work in project management and client services. And the balance is divided between sales and back office operations like finance and admin.
I don't know if you are familiar with that, but in Mexico, most of the political candidates are buying bots on Twitter just to promote their trending topics. What do you think about that? Have you ever heard about that?
Well, I'm familiar with the practice. I couldn't tell you whether it yields the rewards that the investment requires. It's not something that we engage in.
Because everyone is so obsessed with numbers, and probably that's why they do it, because they just want to have like numbers to show to their clients. But what do you think that's a bad way to start a campaign, or what would be how would be good numbers for a candidate, for example, for Trump?
Well, look, there's only one number that matters in an election, and that's coming first. Okay, and that's what's so wonderful about elections. It's like a big brand trying to sell all its produce on one day. You either succeed or you fail. There's no second place, and so elections are a wonderful way of cutting through the nonsense of marketing and advertising. They're very empirical. You can't hide behind your advertising. It either works and you win, or it doesn't and you lose.
Do you think that even in the Brexit decision, your audience was someone who doesn't want to go deeply on the information? Because there was like I forgot the name. The people just was asked after the Brexit election and said, I didn't knew what was that. So is this contemplate on your profile of the people that were going to be participating in the election?
Well, I'm not sure I can speak to that. I mean, look, clearly in every election, both parties are trying to propagate their message as much as possible to make sure that all the voters are informed, or informed to the best of their abilities, so that they can make the right decision, i.e. to vote for their particular candidate or cause in the case of Brexit. It's a great shame if some voters in Brexit weren't properly informed and made poor decisions as a result of that. But I don't think that was through lack of effort by either of the main parties involved, to try and get their message out there.
But it's a fact that most of the people just read a tweet and don't go further. So for you, it's something that it's contemplated on your strategy or not?
I mean, I can't confirm or deny whether that is a fact, but I'll take your word for it. Look, no election is won with a tweet. Okay, it is about months of canvassing. It's about messaging and re-messaging your audience groups with the right material so they can make their decisions. I mean, I think the idea that there are millions of people out there who can be convinced to vote for one party or another based on one tweet or something is probably not substantiated.
Okay, just to end the interview, what is the motto of your company? I mean, you are telling your team that probably on the election, the only word on your mind must be win. Yes, but in terms of data, probably it changes. How is the one thing that drives the direction with your team in terms of data and of course content and engagement and all these factors that affect your work?
Look, clearly winning is important, okay, but winning should be a byproduct of running a really smart campaign. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to focus on implementing our methodology, delivering our technologies in the right way, in the most efficient way, so that we can maximise our ability to support our clients. And if we're able to concentrate on doing that job and succeed in that, then hopefully the outcome will be a win. But we try not to get ahead of ourselves. I think there are many campaigns that we've seen in history who assume they're going to win and make that mistake, and that